you've spent so much time in the public health sector. What has that brought to you in terms of your leadership journey?
I'm actually going to start by saying I never thought I would be a leader.
Mm.
And I actually have encountered that a lot of women of color see themselves that way.
And that's so not how life works.
Leadership really is about serving something bigger than ourselves. Women of color leaders tend to have lots of education. We believe that we have to externally prove ourselves. And yet, in order to be true to ourselves, we also have to be humble and curious.
Hi there. Welcome to Unspeakable Leadership, a space that transcends time, borders, and barriers to reclaim our stories as women of color, leading in organizations, communities, and in our own lives. I'm your host, Roheen Bajra. With a 20-year career trajectory of leadership, an aspiring storyteller, mom of a son and a fur baby, first-generation immigrant, an uninvited guest in Canada, I want to thank you for being on this journey with me. Let us grow together in conversation. Hi, everyone. Here we are again on Unspeakable Leadership and in great company and conversation with our next guest. Let me tell you a little bit about Gabriela Alcade. Gabriela is a multi-hyphenate, like many women of color who find themselves not only exploring their talents, but being able to think about how can they gift the world with their skills. She is a creative, values-driven, anti-supremacist leader. She's also a speaker and a writer. Gabriela has experience in the nonprofit, philanthropic, government, higher education, and grassroots sectors, and she has incredible, extensive training and education in public health. Gabriela, welcome to Unspeakable Leadership. We're so grateful to have you here.
Thank you so much, Rahina. I'm so excited to be here with you.
Oh my gosh, I've been looking forward to today, and I think I shared this with you when we connected because you have such an incredible range of experience that you've been able to bridge almost different types of sectors, like when I think of the art, and then with research, and then with public health, and bridge it together in such a beautiful way. And so, I think my first question for those who are listening and certainly watching is, what has been your leadership journey?
That's a great question. And I'm actually going to start by saying I never thought I would be a leader. And
Mhm.
I actually have encountered that a lot of women of color see themselves that way, that there haven't been enough models for us to visualize ourselves that way. And
Mm.
yet, so many of us have felt compelled into leadership, both formal and informal, because of our values and because of the experiences we've had at the intersection of our identities, where we know that another
Mhm.
way is possible. And that ability
Mhm.
to navigate sort of multiple worlds at once, I think really gives us access to a different way of viewing the world that is extremely beneficial to leading in a way that holds space for others and holds space
Mm.
for possibilities that we haven't explored yet.
Oh gosh. Absolutely. And I even the way you describe the walking this world almost with having your feet planted in different worlds and different perspectives. Like I think of how powerful that is. And I'm curious, you've spent so much time in the public health sector. What has that brought to you in terms of your leadership journey?
One thing is that everything's connected and we're all
Mm.
connected. Certainly through my training in public health, that was very clear.
Mhm.
None of us live in a bubble, no matter how much we might want to. What affects one of us
Mhm.
affects all of us eventually. I think the other thing, just working in nonprofit and education and government, these are all places of service. And
Mhm.
to me, leadership really is about serving
Mhm.
something bigger than ourselves. So it moves you away from an
Yeah.
individual
You.
focus or an individualistic framing and really thinks about, okay, if we're all connected, what is the most logical next step for
Mhm.
us? It turns the framing very much. And I think that's been the biggest lesson for me is we've got to consider how everybody else is affected and take into account other people's perspective. So I always say my
Mhm.
leadership really is facilitated by having amazing people that I get to work with and get to be in conversation with because I learn something new
Good.
and I'm only the result of what I've learned from others and with others.
Absolutely. Yeah, that resonates with me and definitely my experience. And I think the ability to be to be humble and have that level of humility in knowing what you don't know, and then
Mhm.
there are others who
Yeah.
know more.
Yeah.
Like, right?
100%.
It's like yeah, like, it's a bit of I think it's a string of tension that we often find
Mhm.
ourselves as women of color is we may role model that humility, but not every leader is role modeling that as well. And so with these big
Mhm.
systems and, the sectors that you mentioned, there is a type of leadership that has been strategically and systemically allowed to grow, and I'm talking about specifically white male leadership,
Mhm.
and so much so that then when
Mhm.
here we are as women of color, we show up in a very different way. People are not used to that. They really yeah.
There's this tension, right? Because we're not the usual leader, and use a statistic. I am currently a foundation executive director.
Mhm,
Less than 2% of foundation executive directors in the United States are Latina.
mhm.
And that includes male and female,
Right.
foreign born or US born. So, like, my actual experience and perspective is below a 1%.
Mm.
So people aren't used to it. So you have to work so much harder
Yeah,
to actually prove that you deserve to be at those tables. And at the same time, we know from our experience that humility is the only way to lead effectively.
yeah.
So it's this balance of I need to prove myself, I need to be outstanding. Women of color leaders tend to have lots of education, right? We believe that we have to externally prove ourselves, and yet, in order to be true to ourselves, we also have to be humble
Mhm.
and curious and know that we can only lead as well as we are able to follow others.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for sharing, such startling, you know, terrible statistics, really and truly. The fact that we're talking about single digits, and yet when you look at the demographics of the population, particularly where you are based in the United States, but I would also, say here in Canada as well, when we look at racialized groups, the math is not mathing. As
Mhm.
if I
That's
can borrow
that's correct.
Taraji P. Henson's, it's yeah, and that's really sad. It truly is, and
Yeah.
it speaks to how much work there still needs to be done. I have to share one of the incredible, parts of us connecting is really around something that I came across, which is you are literally in the middle of releasing your next act, and we're given the theme of this season of her next act. I was blown away of the synergy and the coincidence of this
Mhm.
happening. Would you love to share what is your next act that's coming through?
Yeah, I actually have it right here. So I'm so excited. I actually got my copies. So I've got a book coming out. It's my first book.
Wow.
It's called What Your Comfort Costs Us. And it is weaving both my story of leadership, how I got to where I am, and the story of multiple other women of color leaders. I
Mm.
did interviews with 10 women of color
Right.
in nonprofit philanthropy and higher education. And I also surveyed women across the United States of various identities
Mhm.
in those three sectors and include their stories in the book as a way of sharing our experience and sort of inviting. Honestly, I feel like it's a gift from all the women that I spoke to,
Mhm.
a gift to others. Our stories are gifts of imagine expanding your ability to see the world
Mm.
through all of our lenses and our stories and our experiences. And I think it makes it a richer world and it allows us to create workplaces where all of us can feel safe
Mhm.
and where all of us can thrive and we have the greatest ability for imagination, because I think that's what's really needed right now is full imagination,
Oh,
full heartful imagination.
Yeah.
And I think that stories can help get us there. So that's why I was so
Mm,
excited to write this book. Again, just like being a leader, I it hadn't occurred to me to write a book because I thought, well, what am I going to share?
mm,
It felt like I was centering myself, and I think many of us are socialized to not feel comfortable with that. So I was not comfortable with that. And when I thought about, well, what if this is a venue to not just share my story, but other women's stories, and
mhm.
how could that help others understand the world in a more complete way,
Yeah.
in a more nuanced way, and to at least spark curiosity. So I think that right now is a great time for a book that shares stories and
Mhm.
invites us to be curious and invites us to grow our world and our worldview through other
Yeah.
stories.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree, and I'm so grateful that that little message or piece of noise that was perhaps in the backdrop telling you what would make you think that you could write a book, that you squashed that, loud and clear, and you said, "Why not me?" And at the same time, you uplifted others at the same time by giving them a platform to share their stories. And so I echo a lot of gratitude as you've given gratitude to others for them trusting you. I would love to also provide that reciprocity of gratitude because for many women of color, we do need books and literature and research that gives us a different version of the narratives that we've
Mhm.
seen. I think of, and we spoke a little bit about this, in my own doctoral research that I'm also exploring the incredible leadership of women of color. What I'm finding is much of the research has been focused on the barriers
Mhm.
and the deficits, which are
Mhm.
absolutely accurate and they're on point. What is missing is the stories of the power and the change and the transformation and how some of that is the embodiment of ancestral wisdom. And so
Yes.
I'm just like,
Yes.
yes, let's talk about
Yes.
those things. And so that we are seeing ourselves as the legacies that are being written as we lead right
Mhm.
now. And so yeah, I know you and I are, like, so aligned, and this is why I'm
Yes.
so appreciative. Yes, like, sending all the hugs. But here's something I'd love to hear from you, Gabriella, and that is when you chose to write this book and uplift the stories, what did you need to leave behind?
Well, for sure, as you noted, that voice that said, "Who would wanna read my story?"
Mm,
'Cause that was an active chatter in my mind,
yeah.
It was like, "Why would anybody wanna read your story? Why do you think you're special? And why would you ask people to spend time on this?"
Mhm.
Um, and others have written about this, and I mentioned it in my book that, I had misnamed that imposter syndrome.
Mm,
And really what you recognize is it's not an individual level problem. It is that we are told this. We have this reinforced. So what I realized is that voice inside my head is not me.
mhm,
That voice is actually sort of taken over and it's telling me something that's not true.
mm,
And I think both a couple of dear friends and my partner because I shared some initial writings that I was doing just really for myself. Like it helped me. It was during the pandemic, and I was writing to sort of keep my sanity
mhm,
as a leader because it's very isolating, particularly during the pandemic. We had just moved to a new place. So I was like, I need grounding. And all of them said, you should turn this into a book.
mm,
Like you should share this. This is really helpful.
yeah.
And it took some coaxing,
Mhm,
and some sitting with myself and really figuring out what are the voices inside and what can I do.
mhm,
Um, so I think that's part of what I had to leave behind is the idea that humility is shutting our power down,
mhm,
that not shining that somehow my shining brightly would dim someone else
mm,
or would cast a shadow instead of thinking about this as actually, I'm creating a platform for
Yeah.
others. Actually, I'm amplifying others'
Yeah.
light and wisdom. And that is an important thing to do. And that's part of how I view leadership. So it's allowed me to really embody what I intellectually knew,
Hmm.
but somehow had allowed the lessons that gained from childhood, even, as a young girl in Latin America, being told like, oh, you should be quiet, you
Mm.
should not call attention to yourself, don't try to be too clever.
Right.
um, all those things that are said to us directly or indirectly had wormed their way into my brain and were impersonating me.
Mm.
So I think identifying who the real me is
Yeah.
and inviting those other parts to say, I understand why you're saying that to me,
Hmm.
but that's not my truth. Um, and that's ongoing work. But I do feel like I've at least established that actually there is a reason to amplify our voices, and it
Yeah.
is going to enrich the world.
The you know I a word that keeps coming through as I hear what you've just shared is the power of discernment.
Mm. Mhm.
Discerning what is a lie from a truth,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
What is considered good versus what has
Mhm.
been labeled, bad or evil or not right. And holding both of those, right? That's what I'm
Mhm.
hearing you share in your growth and your journey is
Mhm.
you were able to hold both of those almost binary ways and say both can coexist, but which one do I want to uplift?
Mhm.
And I think so much of, like, even when we think of gender as a binary construct,
Yes.
we the system, and I know there's much from the work that you've been doing in terms of looking at what has been created in terms of superiority and inferiority, is the system has created this idea and this perception that multiple things cannot be true at the same time.
Yes.
And that's so not how life works.
Right. Yes.
Hi there. I have some personal news that I wanted to share with you. In early March of 2025, I was nominated for the YWCA Women of Distinction Award from an incredible organization, the YWCA Metro Vancouver. Their mission is to advance gender equity alongside women, families, two-spirit, and gender diverse people through advocacy and integrated services that help support the personal, collective, and economic well-being of each of these individuals. I'm truly honored to be nominated. Now, we need your support. You see, each nominee, all 105 women, I know, it's incredible, we're asked to submit a cause that is meaningful and connected to their hearts, their businesses, and the impact that they want to leave. Through the Connecting the Community Award, one of the only awards that is determined by, you guessed it, an online vote. I have chosen to support gender equity. And if you pop on over to the link that I'll share with you, you'll see why. This is deeply meaningful work to me and aligned not only with this podcast, but with the movement that I'm hoping to create in redefining the faces of leadership. Now, if I win, Scotiabank will donate $10,000 to the YWCA in honor of this critical advocacy area. I hope I can count on your support. Now, how do you vote? Well, every 24 hours, you can go to the link on any device and cast your vote. It honestly only takes 3 seconds. You can do that every day until April 1st at noon. I really appreciate you considering my request. I want you to know it's not actually about me. It's about the many people for whom this money can make a difference. So see what causes speak to you and cast your vote today. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for supporting me.
As you were talking about discernment and holding it, I discernment has absolutely been like that
That
precise word.
right.
It's been something that I've been holding and sitting with.
Yeah.
And the idea of how can you hold multiple seemingly opposite or contradictory truths
Yeah.
and to hold them lovingly without
Mhm.
judgment, without shaming, but to hold and be
Yeah.
curious, to actually be curious about where does that come from and to recognize that so much of what we believe has been handed down to
Yeah.
us. You know, it's in the air we breathe. So we didn't have to choose to learn something. You didn't pick up a book and say, okay, I'm going to learn now to that this is the way that one leads, or this is what's appropriate for some people and not others.
Right.
That just put into our subconscious from very early. And just being able to hold that
Mhm.
and to I think the big piece for me, what's been different is how do you hold that lovingly?
Mhm.
How do you hold that with curiosity so that you're not punishing yourself or
Yeah.
um, reproaching yourself for it, but to actually say, let's explore this. Let's be
Yes.
curious together and figure out what actually is important for us to hold right now.
Yeah.
What is
Absolutely.
what is relevant to this reality?
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, and in part because I think sometimes, you know, getting from one stage, whether it's your career or you're making a life choice or it's a, you're on the precipice of making a significant decision. Um, I think of how much there's at least for me, my experience has been this wave and this flood of new information and new
Mhm,
possibilities and seeing a tangible dream that is
mhm,
quite possible in terms of becoming a reality.
yeah.
And so I think of how when somebody is in that like in between stage, there's almost this like pull, right? Like return to what you know because it's comfortable,
Yes.
right? And that's
Yes.
very much what you've embedded in the title of your book. And yet there's also a push to be able to say discomfort is going to get you way further along in your journey of
Mhm,
growth and development. And if we're gonna talk about actualization, like, oh, like high
yeah,
potential, all of those things. So
yeah.
i am I'm wondering, when you were in that in between stage, who or what inspired you during your transition?
I think so many people inspired me, and this sounds a little self-serving,
That's okay.
but what actually the piece that actually got me
Yep.
over, and I'll talk a little bit about the discomfort piece after I share
Yeah.
this, but, it was thinking about six-year-old me.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I'm a mother, and so I'm watched my children grow, they're young adults now, and you know, as a parent,
Mhm.
like, each version of your child is
Mhm.
sort of a person that you still hold in your heart,
Yeah.
and each of them is, even though it's the same person, there is something unique about each stage, and I was in that time that I was watching my children grow, sort of remembering myself as a
Mm.
child, and thinking about six-year-old me
Mhm.
and what she was like, and how fearless she was, and how, like, her version of what
Yeah.
justice meant
Mhm.
was so central to her motivation,
Yeah.
and I thought, you know, what would she be proud of?
Mhm.
She would not hesitate. She would have been like, "Yeah, write a book. Yeah, tell your story." Like, pull all these other amazing leaders in and tell their stories, and so I actually start the book with
Mm.
a story about me as a six-year-old
Ah,
because that is a piece that really, like you said, like, it just pushed me over that
yeah.
threshold and led me to understand the distinction and the confusion that so many of us feel between comfort and safety. And there's a
Yes.
whole chapter in the book about that
Yeah.
because I have identified that not just in myself but in so many of us at the individual level and at the institutional level,
Mhm.
that we tend to want to keep the comfort.
Yeah.
because we get confused and we think that things that feel uncomfortable are unsafe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so for me, that was a big distinction that I needed to clear up
Yeah.
before I sharing stories is vulnerable and it's courageous, and sort of setting that tone for that in for myself and in the book of let's let's get clear on what comfort is and what safety is so that we don't misuse those terms and accuse people who are making us uncomfortable
Mm-hmm.
of being dangerous, right?
Yes.
Because a lot of times we are accused of being dangerous when we make someone uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important to first figure out that distinction for ourselves
Yeah.
so that we don't end up ascribing it to others when really it's just, okay, I don't know that. That makes me anxious and I don't like feeling anxious. My body feels a little unsettled by this.
Yeah.
And instead to say, okay, turn that into an invitation.
Mm-hmm.
Turn that into an invitation to be curious. You don't have to agree.
Yeah.
Being curious and listening to others does not require agreement.
Yeah. Absolutely. You're reminding me of how I've seen like memes that come across like my social media channel, which distinguish the difference between somebody saying, um, "You are intimidating," versus
Mhm.
"I am intimidated."
Yes.
Right? Right?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
so much of what you've just shared, Gabriella, is that there's discomfort in both, but it's how do you carry the discomfort so that you can express yourself in
Mhm.
ways that allow you still to have a level of comfort, to have a level of safety, but to also be in the discomfort, to also be feeling
Mhm.
that level of unsafe, but to not take everything on. So when
Mhm.
when 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 somebody says you are intimidating, it's almost like it's a you problem. You have to deal with it.
Right.
Versus I'm intimidated. Well, now there's an opportunity for a different dance to occur. And
Mhm.
so I truly appreciate that, and I truly appreciate you sharing that it took your young 6-year-old self to carry the incredible wise woman that you are now to say we're doing this,
Yeah.
and that's exciting. I'm truly excited. Let us know, when does your book come out?
March 9th.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's getting here. Yeah, March 9th. It's available for pre-order right now. Highly recommend you going to your local bookstore and supporting your
Yes.
local bookstore. But yeah, it's going to be out on March 9th
Amazing.
through North Atlantic Books Publisher and Penguin Random House is the distributor. So I would love to hear what you think, what
Oh,
your
absolutely.
listeners think about it. My hope is that the book is a conversation just like this,
Yes.
that we're share you know, I'm sharing something. The women that I spoke to are so generously sharing their stories through the book, and I would love to be in dialogue with others and to really hear, like, what does this stir, what kind of discomfort is it causing, what kind of invitations are we is it opening up
Yeah,
for us.
absolutely. And thank you. Thank you for that invitation, which that in itself is also another, I think, demonstration of your vulnerability to want people to engage in the discourse and to
Mhm,
add and to offer their reflections as well. Gabriella, we're
mhm.
we're almost close to our time, so I like to wrap up often our episodes with this one question, and then I have a few more after that as a wrap up. And the last question is, I often think of many women of color who are our listeners and our viewers, and there's also allies too. And so we're appreciative that Unspeakable Leadership has been a platform and a podcast that has resonated with so many. We also know that there are many women of color who are well into their leadership journey. And then there are some who are just starting off for the first time.
Mhm.
So I ask you, when you look back, right, whether it was the act that we just spoke about in terms of writing your book or previous acts, what would you tell someone standing at the threshold of their next act to remember?
I have one that's sort of general and one that's pretty specific, so I'll share it in that sort of dual way.
Mhm.
I think the main sort of existential thing I would say is ground yourself in your values. Like, really spend some time to figure out what drives you. What is your purpose?
Yeah.
Identify that for yourself. That will help you get the answer of what your next step should be.
Yeah.
And then, concretely, one of the things that I learned through the research for my book is how important mentorship is.
Mm.
So, having clarity in your values, identify a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And often for women and women of color, it is identifying a woman or woman of color leader
Mm-hmm.
and reach out to them, because mentorship is so incredibly important in our leadership journeys and in being able to be a leader in a way that doesn't deplete you and that you find your full self
Mm-hmm.
supported and seen by somebody who has a similar
Yeah.
experience.
Thank you. Thank you for your wisdom and the offerings that you have provided, Gabriela. I can't thank you enough for spending time with us. And we are so excited for not just your journey, but also the incredible and powerful written work that you are releasing into this world. I end off with often the episodes with our two last questions. And my first one is, what is your go-to song that just gets you up and moving?
Ooh. Mm, I love music. Um, so lately and throughout the writing of the book, it was Bomba Stereo, uh, Soy Yo.
Oh, I haven't heard that song.
Look him up.
Okay.
It is so good if you ever need to like get yourself
Uh-huh.
motivated and dance by yourself, to have a little individual dance party. Bomba Stereo is amazing, and Soy Yo is the
Oh, yeah.
song that I play for myself.
Oh my gosh. I have to ask, what is it about that song? Like, is there a beat to it? Is it the words?
It's
It's
both.
both.
It's one of those songs where it's both, and it's also, it's, a band that it's women and it's
Oh,
Latinas, and
yeah.
the video is amazing. It's, this little girl, like, it has so much stuff,
Yeah.
in it, and yeah, it's absolutely you cannot not dance when you listen to it, so
Those are the best songs. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And yes, like right away after you and I connect, and I imagine those who are listening, that's the first thing that hopefully they will do right away is go to YouTube or Spotify or wherever
Yes.
they're able
Yes.
to listen. And last question is, you've been so gracious in your offerings and in your invitations. And so I'll just give space to, what is one call to action that you would like those who are listening and watching to take you up on?
I think especially right now, uh, my call to action is to listen, and
Mhm.
to listen with curiosity,
Yeah.
and to listen, yeah, to listen with curiosity. Just
Yeah.
open up your mind. We have so much to learn from each other.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Once again, you're always just open to hearing, open to receiving, and also open to giving. And so I'm going to also reinforce that call to action with, as part of listening. May those who are watching and who are listening to the episode, may you also uplift Gabriela's work. March 9th,
Oh,
we know that date now, loud and clear, is when her book comes out. And often as women of color, given that in the literary space, not a lot of women of color are able to get past the barriers to release books, let alone work with a publisher. And I really encourage each and every one of you, as soon as the book drops, please do celebrate and also support Gabriela. Gabriela,
thank you so
oh,
much.
thank you. Thank you for being here with us on Unspeakable Leadership. It has been an honor. Thank you.
It's been a real joy. Thank you so much, Raheem.
Absolutely. Hi there. As I reflect on my conversation with Gabriela, which feels like a lifetime ago and yet still in my heart, I think of how important it is for each and every one of us to embrace discomfort, as it's really the true source and portal to growth, presence, and change. What resonated for you? Let me know by popping onto my YouTube channel or Instagram, or even just joining me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear what came up for you in this episode. Take care.